Okay, let's get into this. Have you ever been wrestling with a huge decision? Like maybe leaving a job to finally start that project you can't stop thinking about?
Oh, all the time.
You spend days, right, just churning it over in your head, going in circles, and you feel completely paralyzed.
Yeah.
And then you catch yourself talking out loud, maybe to a friend, or honestly just rambling to yourself while making coffee, and all of a sudden something just snaps into place.
That
Yeah.
moment, that feeling of sudden clarity,
Mm.
it's universal. And what's so fascinating is that it is not a coincidence. It's a huge cognitive shift taking place.
A cognitive shift. So when you give your internal monologue a voice, you're literally changing how your brain is processing the information.
You fundamentally change it.
Exactly. So today we are diving deep into the science and practice of thinking out loud, or what the research calls verbal reasoning.
And it sounds so simple, but it's probably the best shortcut to clearer thinking, solving problems faster, and just making better decisions.
We've gone through all the research here, the neurology, the psychology, the practical guides, and we've basically distilled it into a full methodology.
Right. Our mission here is to give you a direct path to integrating this into your life.
Yeah.
For more clarity, less decision fatigue. So let's jump right in. Why does just speaking actually change our brain?
So, yeah, why is thinking silently, why is it such a bad tool for complicated stuff?
Well, when thoughts stay internal, they're masters of disguise. They're vague, they're circular.
And completely unexamined. Because our brain is, well, it's lazy. It loves a shortcut.
It's precisely that. Silent thought lets us use all this cognitive shorthand. But speaking, it's like it flips a switch. It forces something called serialization.
Serialization, meaning you have to put them in order.
You're forced to put those messy thoughts into a specific sequence. And this is the key part. You have to choose specific words. This engages parts of your brain that just, stay dormant when you're just thinking.
Okay, so this is where the brain wiring gets really interesting. When you speak, you're firing up a few key systems. The first one is Broca's area.
Right, which is all about speech production. And to get Broca's area working, you have to organize those abstract thoughts into, a proper grammatical structure.
And that forced organization is the clarity you feel.
It is. You can't speak a vague feeling. You have to turn it into a noun, a verb, a connection. And on top of that, two other networks come online, the phonological loop and motor planning.
The phonological loop, what is that?
Think of it as your cognitive echo chamber. When you speak, you actually hear yourself, and that creates this crucial real-time feedback mechanism.
So silent thinking is like trying to edit a document just in your head, but speaking is like hearing it read back to you. You'd instantly hear all the typos and weird sentences.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
You catch contradictions and logical errors that your internal voice, which is very biased editor,
Yeah.
it just glosses right over them.
And motor planning.
Well, even the physical act of preparing to speak, that activates more neural networks. It results in deeper, stickier processing of the idea.
I love this concept of the externalization effect. Internal thoughts feel so real, don't they? They feel like the absolute truth.
They feel like reality.
But the moment you speak one, it stops being part of you. It becomes an object, something you can look at.
And that psychological distance, it gives you the space to evaluate the thought objectively, almost like someone else said it.
Right.
And that distance is where you suddenly spot the hidden assumptions you are making, or you catch yourself in a loop of circular reasoning.
Or you realize just how much emotion is coloring your logic. It's why a therapist will ask, what do you hear yourself saying?
Exactly. When you hear it back, you think, wait, that doesn't actually make sense. Or, wow, I sound way more upset than I thought I was.
Now, we should probably mention, not everyone thinks in words, right? Some people are very visual.
That's a good point. But the research is pretty conclusive here. Even for visual thinkers, verbalizing is a huge benefit. It enhances memory encoding, it improves how you categorize things, and it really solidifies planning.
So for the listener who's stuck on that big career decision, what's the verdict?
Well, silent thinking is fast. It's fine for simple, familiar stuff like, which way to drive to work.
But for anything complex?
For anything complex or new or emotional, thinking out loud wins every single time. Silent thinking is just too vulnerable to our biases and blind spots. Verbal reasoning forces a much more thorough, honest examination.
Okay, so the brain science is solid, but I think people are wondering, when do you actually use this? When do you make that switch from silent spinning to talking it out?
You have to learn to recognize the signs that you're stuck.
Yeah.
If you've been going in circles for days, or if you feel that emotion is driving the choice but you can't say how, That's your cue.
So it's for those big decisions with lots of variables and uncertain outcomes.
Exactly, like that career change. And a great practical example is something from the tech world, rubber duck debugging.
Right. You don't actually need the duck, do you?
No, you just need the act of explaining.
Yeah.
It's all about forced articulation. You state your goal, you describe what you've tried that failed, you walk through what you think is happening.
And you question every single assumption along the way.
Yes. And the solution almost always appears right when you verbalize an assumption you didn't even know you had. You'll say, well, I assumed the data was correct. And right there you realize, oh, I never actually checked.
I can hear someone thinking, this sounds like it takes a lot of time. Isn't there a risk of just, overanalyzing everything?
That's a fair question.
Mm.
But the difference is that silent rumination is circular. You're just spinning your wheels. Verbal reasoning is linear. It's purposeful.
It's an investment.
It's an investment of time up front that saves you from making a huge mistake later. You could spend 2 weeks silently worrying about that job pivot, or 30 minutes talking it through and finding the core fear. The 30 minutes is way more efficient.
And it's not just for problems, it's for planning, for setting goals.
Absolutely. There's research on something called implementation intentions, which shows that just stating your plans aloud dramatically increases your follow-through.
It creates a sense of accountability, even if it's just to yourself.
It's part of it, but it also forces you to be specific. You can't just say, I want a new job.
Mm.
You have to articulate why it matters, list the obstacles, and, this is critical, plan your response. You say out loud, when I feel self-doubt, I will call my mentor. That spoken commitment is powerful.
And for anyone who loves learning, there's the production effect.
Right. The simple act of speaking information out loud massively improves your memory compared to just reading it silently.
So teach it to yourself out loud.
It's the best way. If you can't explain a concept clearly, in full sentences, you don't really understand it. The attempt to explain immediately shows you where the gaps are.
All right, let's get into the strategic toolkit. Let's talk about structured techniques to break through really tough decisions, starting with the 5 whys.
Yes, and this is so much more effective when spoken. It's all about digging past the surface reason. So let's take that career pivot again. You start with, I want to leave my job because it's boring.
Okay, so that's why number 1. Then you ask again, why is it boring? And you might say, because I'm not using my full potential.
Why number 3, why does that matter? Because if I stay here, I'll never build something for myself.
Why number 4? Why do you need to build something? Because that means risking failure, and I'm terrified of failure.
And then the final, spoken why, reveals the real issue. Why are you terrified? Because my identity is tied to being competent, and failure would mean I'm not who I thought I was.
Wow. And just like that, you've gone from boring job to a deep-seated fear about your identity. You can't ignore that once you've heard yourself say it.
You just can't. The process forces you past the easy, socially acceptable answers.
Another great technique is talking to your future self. This seems designed to get you out of that short-term anxiety.
It is. You imagine yourself a year, maybe 5 years from now, looking back, and you speak as that future self. You describe what happened after you stayed and what happened after you made the pivot.
And you listen for which one sounds more authentic. Which future you are you more proud of?
Precisely. You also have the regret minimization framework, which Jeff Bezos famously used. The question is simple.
When I'm 80, will I regret not doing this?
And you have to talk through the 2 kinds of regret. The regret from action, you try and you fail, versus the regret from inaction, from always wondering, what if?
And the sources suggest the regret from inaction is almost always worse.
It's much worse, and it lasts longer. When you fear, you learn a lesson. When you don't act, you just carry that burden of possibility forever. Speaking that difference out loud is incredibly clarifying.
Okay, and for surfacing risks, there's the pre-mortem. I love this one.
It's brilliant. You imagine the decision has already been made, and it failed spectacularly. Now, talk through all the reasons why it failed.
So for the new business, you'd say, it failed because I relied too much on one client, or it failed because I hated the sales part and I just ignored it.
Exactly. It's so much easier to see those problems in a hypothetical past than it is to admit there are real risks in your uncertain future. It just surfaces all the weak points you need to plan for.
And finally, arguing both sides. Forcing yourself to make the strongest possible case for each option out loud.
This is way better than a pro-con list. The option that you find easier to argue for, the one where the words just flow, that often reveals your true preference, and the one that feels forced and full of weak justifications, that shows you the fundamental problems you need to solve.
This all sounds amazing, but we have to talk about the biggest barrier for most people,
Mhm.
the ego, the feeling that you're just being silly talking to yourself.
And that is the single most important hurdle. And you have to reframe it. You are not talking to yourself. You are using your voice as a sophisticated thinking tool. It's no different than a pilot using a checklist.
The weirdness is just a social thing and it fades.
It absolutely does. You just have to start in private. And the number one rule of the practice is simple. Continuous speaking.
Don't stop.
Do not stop. If you think, I don't know what to say,
Yeah.
then you must say, I don't know what to say. And keep going. Rambling is fine. The goal is externalization, not eloquence.
What about going off on tangents? I do that all the time when I'm trying to think something through.
Tangents aren't distractions. They are connections your brain is making. Follow the tangent for a moment, then bring yourself back by asking, okay, how does that connect to the main problem? The key insight is often hiding in that tangent you almost dismissed.
So to build this into a habit, what do the sources recommend?
Small daily check-ins are best. A quick morning session, what's on my mind today? An evening one, where did I get stuck today? It prevents a kind of thinking backlog from building up.
And we can actually use modern tools for this now. We don't have to just talk to a rubber duck.
No, you can use an AI as the thinking partner. You speak your thoughts, and it can act as that objective listener. It can ask you clarifying questions or summarize what you've said, or even challenge an assumption.
But the key is to use it to explore, not to decide.
Absolutely. The final decision always has to be yours.
This has been such a clarifying deep dive. I mean, the takeaway is that your thinking literally changes when you give it a voice. It forces organization, it externalizes your thoughts so you can actually look at them, and it bypasses all those lazy mental shortcuts.
It really is less about talking to yourself and more about finally listening to yourself.
Exactly.
And maybe the final thought for you to take away today is this. The goal isn't just to find a solution for the problem right in front of you. It's to learn what your own good decisions actually sound like.
So a kind of decision journal.
A spoken one. The next time you face a complex choice, don't just solve it. Record yourself talking it through just for a couple of minutes so you can go back later and learn what clarity and good judgment really looks and sounds like for you.